Okay, so for the Unit 7, Objective 2, this is just a continuation of circles. So we want to review a little bit here with what we learned in Objective 1. So we have our standard form or descriptive form of circles, which is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And then just as a little reminder, this is basically our Pythagorean theorem, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And that's because a circle is a set of all points equidistant from its center, so the center would be hk, and that equidistant part is the radius, because the radius is the same regardless of what point we choose, and we find the distance to the center. So that's what we worked with in Objective 1. And we also talked about how do we complete the square, turn things into perfect square trinomial. So this is just a review of Objective 1. And then the complete the square part, do a quick review on that. So when we go to complete the square, what we're looking to do is turn something into a perfect square trinomial. So either something that looks like x minus a quantity squared or x plus a quantity squared. So that's our goal, right? And we're going to have an extra constant we're going to have to work with. But this is our goal, is to get something into a quantity squared because we want it to fit into our descriptive form. So if we have, for example, x squared minus 12x, I'm trying to figure out what number do I add to turn this into a perfect square. So I know that when I distribute this out, I add the same two terms together, right? Ax and ax to get this. So that means I added together -6 and -6, and that's how I got my -12, right? And these would have x terms. And so then to find this number, it's just whatever a is being multiplied by itself. So in this case, it would be -6 times itself. So that would be positive 36. And then so my factors would be x minus 6 and then squared. So I think of two numbers that I add together to get -12. It has to be the same number twice because I'm trying to find a perfect square. And that number times itself gives me the constant I'm searching for to complete the square. So let's do one more here. So the fractions are a little bit tougher in terms of how we think about it. But again, I'm trying to figure out what two numbers do I add together to get 7. Well, that would be 3.5 and 3.5. Or in terms of fractions, it's just half of 7, right? So if I add 7 over 2 to 7 over 2, I would get 7 again, right? Because that would be 14 divided by 2. So then if I multiply 7 over 2 by itself, that gives me the constant to finish out the perfect square trinomial. So 7 times 7 and 2 times 2. So then my factors would be x plus 7 over 2 squared. Okay, so that's a little review before we get started. Okay, so let's take a look at an example here. So we want to write the equation in descriptive form, and we want to state the center and the radius of the circle. So Let's say that I have this equation. So I'm looking at putting this into descriptive form. So I know that descriptive form is when everything is grouped, right? So I need to get to perfect square trinomials. So if I want to do that, I need to somehow turn this jumbled mess into descriptive form, which remember looks like this. And the only way to turn this into descriptive form is to be able to factor it. Well, the only way to be able to factor it is to have a perfect square trinomial. So that means somehow I need to incorporate this idea up here to where I need to figure out what constant do I need to add to my x terms in order to get it to look like this. Because that's what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to get my x terms together, figure out what that constant needs to be to get it into factored form. So then that means my first step is I need to rearrange everything. So I want to get my x terms together and I want to get my y terms together. So I'm going to reorder, and the reordering is I'm going to have my x terms together, so x squared plus x plus something, right? Because I need to figure out what does that perfect square need to be. And then I need to have my y terms plus something. And then if I have extra numbers, right, this plus 4, then I want to move that over to the other side. And I know whatever I add to one side, I have to add to the other. Okay. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, right? I want to reorder. So if I look here, I have my x squared, and then I have a negative 6x, and I want to complete the square on that, so I need to figure out what does that constant need to be. And then I have a y squared term, and I have a negative 2y, and then I need to figure out what am I going to add to this trinomial, right? Or what does a constant need to be of the trinomial to make it a perfect square? And so this 4 right here is not going to be helpful here, so I'm going to subtract it over, and when I subtract 4 from this side, I have to on this side. And if I add a number here, I also have to add it over here. And I'm going to do it underneath because I ran out of room. And if I add a number here, I need to add to this side, right? Whatever I add to the left, I have to add to the right. Whatever I add here, I have to add here. So what two numbers make negative 6? It's negative 3 and negative 3. And so when I multiply them times themselves, I'll get a positive 9. So I'm taking half of 6 and timesing it by itself. What two numbers make negative 2? Negative 1 and negative 1, which make positive 1. So if I add 9 and 1 here, I have to also add it to the right side. So now I'm going to factor. So this is my first trinomial, should be a perfect square, and there's my second trinomial, should also be a perfect square. So two numbers that multiply to 9 and add up to negative 6 are negative 3 and negative 3, so I have the same thing twice. Two numbers that multiply to 1 and add to negative 2 are negative 1 and negative 1. And then I want to combine these numbers together. So 9 minus 4 is 5, plus 1 more is 6. And then once I get to here, it's just like our problems from last night. I just need to state the center and the radius. So the center here would be positive 3 and positive 1. This is my radius squared, so then my radius would be the square root of 6.